Shut up and sit down.
Hello, welcome to Chapter 0 podcast.
I'm Megan,
And I'm Lily.
and this is chapter 2. Whoa,
Oh.
this is episode 2, outlines and story plotting. So we're gonna talk about kind of what happens once you have the idea, once you have the characters, once you're like getting ready to start actually writing it, and we're gonna talk about my system versus Lily's system, and then like talk a little bit about some authors that we know their systems. Not a lot of people post it or talk about it, but we do know a little bit, and then a little bit of research and outlining. Yeah. Okay, do you want to get started, and do you want to start talking about your method, like what you do?
Sure, so we're talking like right now, like as soon as you get your idea, what do you do to like...
Yeah, like once you, we can kind of go off of like, once you have your general idea for like the story, the characters, in the world, not like fully formed.
Okay.
Just like, once you're like, okay, I kind of want it to be like this, this, and this, and then where do you go from there?
We're going to do a whole episode on characters, which will be the next episode.
Yes.
And then we're going to do a whole episode on setting.
Yeah, so this is just...
This is like
the culmination.
Storyline.
Yes.
First thing I do, as soon as I get the ideas, I just jot down like bullet points.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, oh my god, this is this. This is this. This is this. This is the world.
Yeah.
So like, there's going to be 4 characters. Boom. It's going to be in a fantasy.
Yeah.
Boom. They're going to be royalty. Boom.
Yeah.
Things like that. I'll just jot that down so I don't forget it. And I have ideas, I mean, not semi-regularly, but regularly, that I just write down somewhere. And then if it's still staying with me, like months afterwards, like I think it was last year, I got this idea.
Yeah.
I'm going to call it my aviation idea.
Okay.
I don't mind sharing that.
Yeah.
And I would just call it my aviation idea.
Yes, I
And
remember
I
this.
had it for like a good 8 months to a year.
Yeah.
And I just finally started writing it. And so that's how I knew that it was going to be something, was that it stayed with me.
Yeah.
So writing down ideas and then just kind of playing them with them in your head, I think is important. Seeing if there's anything there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't really have a system like Megan does.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more of what you would call a pantser.
Mm-hmm.
I like write out general things that I want to happen, or like ideas of characters and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But then I don't really like expand them. I kind of like to just go into it with like very small ideas.
That's
and then
fun.
as I'm writing, see where it takes me, or even just doing like free writing.
Mm-hmm.
So just as I'm doing those bullet points, just seeing where those lead me and then making like a mind map.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really helpful just to expand that idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as I'm like ready to do an outline, what we've done that always helps me is we have like this big room at our school where it has like tons of whiteboards just around the whole entire room.
Yeah.
And so for me, I feel like this has happened with like the three books that I'm writing.
Yeah.
Is just
Literally
just timelining it, but like not going in with any set notions of what it's going to be. Just being like, okay, this happens. Oh, what if this happened next? Okay, what if this happened next? And then I have like a very vague storyline outline, and then from there I take that and then I rework it like a bunch, and then I start writing. If it changes, it changes. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So I don't necessarily have like an outline system like you.
Yeah. No, yeah. My system is quite different.
Yeah.
I think I get my kind of culmination of ideas like general setting, general characters, general like where I want, like what kind of story I want it to be. Like, do I want it to be like a heist, or like is there a war? What's going on? And then I sit down with that, and then I have like a couple days of like just kind of brainstorming, where I just kind of let my mind wander a little bit, and then if any like scenes pop into my head, like, oh, I want like this fight between these people, or this, so I basically just come up with a bunch of stuff, let that happen, and then I write it all down, and then I'm like, okay, well, now I have to connect these dots, because why are these people even fighting? Like, I want to have this sequence of them fighting, but I don't know why they're fighting, so I have to, like, kind of fill in the blanks, and then from there I go with a general timeline, and then I like to write different, like, perspectives, and so then from there I have to break it down by which character is going to talk about what kind of plot point that I'm going off of. So I have individual timelines for each character, and then I set that up. Wow, this sounds so confusing, I think.
Outlines are hard because I feel like they're so personal.
Yeah, it's kind of up in the air to see.
Yeah.
So, like, I guess the main difference is I think Lily writes chronologically, and I do not.
Yeah, I also
jump
feel like
around.
You're more of a thinker, and I'm more of a feeler.
Oh, yes. I mean, there's definitely emotion in my work, but I'm also, like...
No, I just mean, like, thinking about what you're writing.
Yeah, I'm, like, very methodical of, like, I'm gonna do this in this chapter. It's very, like, set. Like, I'm gonna get to this point.
I'm more of, like, let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's different than what I
right.
thought was going to happen, but let's just...
I mean, I think both ways are fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I get to the point where I kind of just have a separate timeline, and I write all of one character's point of view, and then all of another character's point of view, and then all that, and then I puzzle piece it back together, and then, I mean, I'm sure there's plot holes, I'll have to smooth it over, but...
That's for later.
That's for later.
That's someone else's problem.
Yeah.
You in the future.
Yeah, this is just the draft. So yeah, that's my general method.
I do think it's really important, though. I mean, like, I say I'm a pantser, but I know there's people that just, like, don't do any planning and then they just start writing.
Yeah.
I could never do that, and
it's
I would suggest having, like, a notebook or something where you're keeping track of all your ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's important to outline and plan, but, like, do it at your own pace.
Whatever you think is good. Because, of course, everyone is different. So, like, I'm different from Lily. Lily's different from me. And you just kind of, I didn't go into it having this method. This is something that kind of has evolved over me figuring out what it is that I need in my head when I'm going to sit down and write, or, like, what it is that I need for my own clarity.
Yeah.
Because when I first started, I would find myself getting super confused at everything. And I was like, I don't know. I was kind of like spinning in the void.
Yeah.
So I had to kind of sit with myself and think, what do I need specifically to give myself peace of mind when I start going? Which is kind of, I guess, how everyone finds their method, is like what works for you as a writer, what works for you as like a person.
I think that's why it's so hard when... like we're talking about other authors now, like why they don't share it so much is because it's so hard to give people advice on how to outline, because, I mean, it's not going to work for you. Some things aren't going to work for you, some things are going to work for you, and it's kind of up to you to play around with it, like a bunch, and then see what works.
Yeah, I think that's why the field is so, like the field of writing books is kind of so... I feel like going into it, there's a lot of unknowns because there's not really like a instruction manual on how to go about doing it. There's, of course, like a ton of suggestions, and there's like, you can go find like character building worksheets and like outlining worksheets online and stuff, but that's, of course, not going to work for everybody because it really is a process, and depending on what kind of thing that you're writing, like some stuff that people are writing is very personal and emotional, and you have to like sit with that and deal with that, and it's a process. And so I think, I don't know, we're not trying to tell people like this is how you should do it. We're just kind of sharing like what we do and like encouraging people to find your own method, because everyone's different, and that is great.
Yeah, I do think moving more towards like story plotting.
Yeah.
One thing I did with the first book that I wrote, and I'm kind of doing with the one that I'm working on right now, is still keeping that 3-act structure, because I do like that. Yeah. Because I think it keeps good pacing to the story. Yeah. Of like how much you're revealing when. Yes. And then when the climax would be, when the resolution is coming, if it's coming. And so I think playing around with that, or at least having that as an outline, is important.
I do think it's helpful to do at
Keeps you
least
on track.
Some sort of planning of like points in the story. You don't have to outline every action, but at least having those like act points.
Yeah, having that exposition, rising action, climax.
Yeah, I mean there is a
falling
reason
action.
we learned how to do that
Yeah.
in kindergarten or whenever we learn.
I do think that's helpful. I don't think that's just for like whatever. I think that's important.
Yeah, I think that is a good thing.
Yeah.
And so we can now move into probably talking about other authors' methods. We don't really know much because, like we said, they're not really publicly talked about. I do know that one author who does kind of document is Victoria Aveyard a little bit on her Instagram stories. We've seen a little bit of what she does, not necessarily planning, but she does, for at least world building a little bit, she does like literally make diagrams of like maps or castles or whatever that she's gonna put in, which I think is super interesting. And like her books specifically are very like airtight. Like she has everything kind of worked out. Even if it's not in the book, I'm sure if you ask her, she'll be like, yeah, it's like this. And I know that Marissa Myers, she has diagrams of for Cinder, which I'm like, I don't know how you came up with that. That's very sciencey. I don't know that stuff. But yeah.
I know Stephen King.
Yes.
Does not do any outlines at all.
He does not. He just writes. That's interesting, actually. And a little scary.
He comes up with like.
He comes up with
I think
whack
that's
stuff.
how his stuff is so weird.
Yeah.
Is because he just is like, I'm just gonna see where this takes me.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, I think that's an interesting way of writing. We're not really gonna spend that much time on other authors outlining because they haven't as much shared it, which is fine because, like we said, it is very personal. But research is actually, I think, something that is semi-important, especially if people are going to be dealing with difficult topics for a character, which like you can shy away from it if you don't want to do the research, because if you're not going to do the research, maybe it's not the greatest idea to put it in there, because of course, like, we want to handle difficult topics with grace and with knowledge so as not to potentially hurt anybody. And Leigh Bardugo has talked about, she did interview people who had been through sex trafficking situations when she was writing about Inej, which I'm not going to give away anything in the storyline, but that does play into it. Which I haven't been in a situation where I've needed to do that kind of research, but I'm sure I will.
I think research is important for like all kinds of different things.
Yeah.
I think it's actually really important.
Yeah.
As far as culture, going back to Leigh Bardugo.
Oh yeah.
I know in her Grishaverse, every single fake, I'm going to call it a fake race, I guess, or fake country is based off of a real one.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of research that needs to go into that to making sure you're being like culturally sound or whatever. So if you're doing stuff like that, or maybe you're writing a book, like my aviation one, I have to do research about planes and stuff, how that works. Or if you're doing one that's very political, you're going to need to do research on political structures and stuff like that. Also, like religion. If you're basing your religion off of an already existing one, research into that. Setting.
Yeah, there's
what
just a lot of
from,
research.
What season?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Research is actually, it's quite important.
It is
because it's one thing to just make something up, but like, I don't know, this is why I think writing is such a strange phenomenon almost, because it's like, yeah, it's a kind of a liberal arts thing, but also you have to like learn all this stuff to be able to write about it. And like, especially in reading science fiction, like that's a lot of science knowledge that they had to figure out on their own. And like, obviously it's science fiction, so there is a fiction aspect of it, but like, there is a lot of research that had to go into it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of daunting almost, but like, I don't know, I think it's worth it once you get through that, and then you can create a really fun and interesting story. Okay, so we're going to segue, even though there's no segue, into talking about, because we've been talking about outlines and story plotting and structure, and so like we're going to talk a little bit about structure of books that we like versus don't like. So would you like to start? there's a structure that you like?
I do enjoy when books are broken up into sections.
Like a part?
Like parts. Or
Uh-huh.
like, there's like, yeah, I guess they're parts. I feel like I do that in all of my books.
I do it in all of
maybe.
mine.
I don't even know why, because it's like sometimes I'll just ignore it and I'll keep on. It's not like I stop at this section and then like go into the next one.
Yeah.
But just like having that moment of like knowing, okay, that's a stopping point.
Yeah.
Like that's, the author decided right here was like kind of an end to something.
Yeah.
And then something else is going to begin.
Yeah.
Not necessarily like one storyline's ending, but like there's a continuation, but like just acknowledging that like there was an ending somewhere in that section.
Yeah.
Like a place where it needed to be. I don't know.
Yeah, I do like when books have parts.
I also like when they're titled.
Yeah, when the parts are titled.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting too. And I kind of like when, like, because the part itself can become its own. Like, it's easier to do time jumps if you need to do a time jump. And I think it's interesting because I think you can play around a lot with, like, what is in each part versus, like, I mean, because sometimes books are written where the parts can literally be two separate books, but I think it's interesting that they're one and they're separated into parts. I always find that really interesting. And another thing, structure-wise, that I do like is I like when there's different point of views, but it doesn't necessarily have to be alternating of chapters. I like when I've read books where each part is in a different person's perspective, which I think is super interesting to give us that one-sided view, like, per sequence of action. Yeah. I think that's really interesting. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I've never seen that before. But, like, I'm sure I would like it. I don't know if I was reading that, I'd be, like, wanting someone else's point of view sooner, though.
Yeah.
Because then it feels kind of one-sided.
Yeah. I think it depends.
But also, I mean, like, books that only have one point of view, that doesn't seem one-sided necessarily.
Yeah.
But then there's also books that choose not to do parts at all.
Yeah, and just do chapters.
That's totally fine. I don't really notice that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not like, oh, I wish this would, like, stop right here and have a blank page that has 2 words on it.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to change, change everything.
Yeah.
But, like, when books do have it or they have something special coinciding with it, I like that.
Yeah. How do you feel about, I just thought of this, like a thick chapter versus, like, a smaller chapter?
Ooh, chapter size.
Yeah.
I do prefer smaller chapters. If it was between short or long, I would rather have it short.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you don't need to like say all that much.
Yeah, I like ones.
And also when it's short, I'm more likely to read the next chapter.
Yeah, if it's shorter, I'm like, okay, like the action is like moving really, really fast. Although, like, I'm thinking of how in Harry Potter, each chapter is like a whole event. Like, versus.
Yeah, like knowing when to break up.
Yeah, versus like.
That's a good question.
Because when I've read books that have thick chapters, it's either one of two things. Either like it's written, because I've never read anything written like Harry Potter. There's no parts in Harry Potter. So literally just like thick, giant chapters that have.
That cover like a whole day.
Yeah, that cover like a big chunk of action, which obviously those books are really big.
Yes.
But I've also read really long chapters where it's just like a lot is going on, but not really any action. It's just a lot of the character talking.
Yeah.
And then I start to get bored.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, listen, I care about what you have to say, but like this isn't fast enough. And I think I like when the action is broken up a lot in between little chapters. Because I read the Maze Runner books are like that. Like each chapter is at longest like 4 pages.
Yeah.
And like it is super quick, and sometimes there's a chapter that's literally half a page, and it's just like a really quick like break up in between like a long sequence of action of another character just saying their bit and then like moving on.
I think when they're like that, when it's like one page, it builds like the tension.
Yeah.
So having like the climax, but leading up to the climax, it's like short chapters of like, oh my god, what's gonna happen? And then you're like, oh my god, that's it. And then you keep waiting for it and waiting for it. And then finally the climax can be like a longer chapter. So like playing with chapter variation length is cool too.
Yeah. I've also seen books where like there's one chapter that's literally just a sentence.
Those are cool.
And I find that so like impactful because I'm thinking of Holly Black does it in Cruel Prince, and it's just this one line, and it's just kind of like, oof.
Yeah.
Like, you're just like, whoa, okay, that's, ow. And then
I
I'm
like
also
that.
thinking of As I Lay Dying.
Didn't read that.
Yeah, you did.
Oh.
You
When
read
you- Okay, we read that in class. I love that book. You know what I thought of?
What?
Is the book that they made into the movie with Chloe Grace Moretz. Where she's in the hospital
She's in the
dying.
cello one.
Yeah, what's that one called?
Wake up for me, or like don't wait for me, or something. As I was sleeping, while I was asleep is a rom-com with Sandra Bullock. Okay.
I was not thinking of the Faulkner novel.
Okay, I was like, what you said? I never read that. I was like, Lily, we were in the same class. We read that with our favorite teacher, and we watched a whole movie. Actually, you didn't watch the movie.
Was the movie good?
The movie was actually super weird. We could talk about that actually, because they were doing, the whole movie was in split screen. So half of the screen something else was happening, and then half of the screen something else was happening, and then there was a lot of like half of the screen being like just someone's face looking, and then the characters were saying lines from the book, like the introspective stuff. It wasn't just like the dialogue and the action, like. And then it was James Franco directed, which is why it was weird. Mm. I mean, it was a good movie. It was real unsettling and real uncomfy, but the book is like that, so I mean, cool. I'm thinking of the book when, this isn't a spoiler, it's one Vardaman chapter, and it just says, my mother is a fish.
Yeah.
Hard stop, next. And I was like,
you're like, what?
It's just it's confusing and impactful. But yeah, I was like, what do you mean you didn't read that book?
I definitely
read that book.
We both read it. We wrote 2 whole essays on
it.
it.
We wrote 2 whole essays on it. It's a good book.
It was actually really good. I was not expecting to like it.
Yeah.
But I did. And the more we talked about it, the more I liked it.
Actually, we can actually quickly talk about, because our teacher talked about that book and who wrote it? Faulkner.
I'm pretty sure.
And he has like maps. I know that Faulkner had maps and like all these characters, and all the books that he wrote were in the same world.
Yeah.
So there are cameos of other characters from other books in like As I Lay Dying, which I think
it's
is
a band.
Okay. I think that that's super interesting, having everything set in one universe. I guess I don't know if that's a method. I know he has maps. And
yeah, no, he definitely did talk about
that's interesting.
Like there's like one character that's in like this book that's the main character
in another book. And it's like not important at all, and you don't even need to know that, but it's just like, I don't think that's a fun anecdote.
I think it's really cool.
Especially like thinking of Faulkner having this entire kind of world in his head, and then just telling stories from it. I think that's so interesting.
Cool. Little side note.
Yeah.
Very cool.
But yeah, that's the one-liner chapters are fun.
Yeah, I do like those, and I would think about doing that for a book. Actually, now I really want to.
Now I want to.
A one-word chapter.
Ooh.
Let's cut it down. How about just a period?
A blank page.
A blank page.
Chapter 5. Nothing.
You can do that when a character dies.
Oh, that's sad.
I have an idea.
Oh my gosh.
That would be
oh my gosh, wait, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, wait, that's really upsetting. Cool. You should do that.
I'm going to make a note.
Okay, write that down. You should do that. Okay. That is a big oof. Okay. Lily's about to ruin people's lives with this. Okay. That's really good. Okay. Well, I feel like this is a good point to just move into our little end bit of what are you reading? What are you writing? Writing?
We can double over writing.
We can. Okay. Why not?
I don't know.
We can be vague.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
I mean, by the way, the reason we're being vague is not to be narcissistic to ourselves, but we just want to make sure our ideas stay original.
Yeah. Also, because they're not out in the world yet, so we want it to be if once they get out in the world, we don't want everyone to already know. Yeah. Everyone, as in I don't know. We're not trying to say everyone listens to this. We just want
we're just being superstitious.
We just want it to be a surprise. So yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so we're going to be vague.
We're going to be vague, but we can. Do you want me to start? Sure. Okay, I am working on 3 separate things at once because I can't make up my mind. So I have something that's going to be hopefully a duology, and then 2 standalones. So the duology is, to be vague, there's a mafia type mob situation, and I'll just kind of say what the idea was. So the idea was if there's, like, if someone who's in charge of the mob, if he has, like, kids, somebody needs to watch the kids while he's, like, off doing his mafia stuff. So it centers around basically his babysitter, who then has to live with the mafia and, like, can't have a normal life because she has to take care of these kids and keep them safe from whatever could potentially hurt them. And so it's just kind of dealing with that and what would happen if something did happen to the children, and what her role in basically in the mafia, but not really in the mafia, is. So that's what the duology is. And then one of the standalones is, I guess it would be urban fantasy. There's not magic or anything. It's just set in a world that's not America. And it's about these 4 friends who are, like, they just got out of being a part of this war, and they're kind of dealing with trying to get their lives together after that. And then my third standalone is, I'm actually working on it with Lily and our other friend Drew, and we created we made a world and then made a little, like, historical timeline and then picked points in the timeline, and then we're each writing a story from it. So, and that's what that is. I will pass it over to Lily for what you're writing.
I am currently working, I also have 3 projects, 2 of which I'm not connecting with, so I'm not going to force myself into writing them, so they're kind of on the back burner right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm working on my aviation idea, which is, I guess, an urban fantasy, sci-fi type book.
Sure.
I don't know.
It's open-ended.
It's a mixed genre. I don't want to use the word fantasy because it's not. There's, like, zero magic. It's just, like, advanced technology.
Yes.
So I'm working on that. I kind of have a general storyline down. I don't have the ending at all. I don't think of endings until I get there. I'm kind of just doing my system, and I'm just starting to write. I only have, like, 4 chapters done. But yeah, I'm actually having a good time writing that, whereas the other ones I was not having a good time. Eventually, which is fine. Eventually I'll get back to them. But yeah, that's what I'm writing right now.
Cool. Sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
So that is it for episode 2. It's a little shorter, but that's okay.
Short and sweet. That's all
Short
we
and
needed
sweet.
to say.
So yeah, stay tuned for episode 3, which I think is going to be on characters.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a guest for that one, so that's fun.
That is fun.
And yeah.
So we do have an Instagram. If you want to follow us, it's at Chapter 0 Podcast. We'll be posting some, like, things there for when we post on SoundCloud, which we're on. We're also on YouTube, so subscribe to us there, follow us on SoundCloud, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, that's episode 2. Bye.
Bye.